Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Halton Police Board to order. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being with us today. Before I get started, I just want to let everybody know and pass along the board's condolences to those watching, or sharing our condolences to those watching the live stream today. Many of us just came back from the funeral for former Chief Jim Harding. It was an amazing ceremony to memorialize an amazing individual. I learned a lot more about our former chief and the founder of the Halton Regional Police Service and his family, his daughter, his sons, his wife, and all grandchildren and great-grandchildren have the condolences of this board. I also want to acknowledge the chief's wonderful comments at the conclusion of the ceremony today, memorializing a friend and a mentor as well. So thank you to you, the chief, and to our amazing team that supported their family through this journey as well. So our condolences once again. And thank you, members of the board, for attending and representing the board there as well today. Members of the board, Mr. Secretary, do we have any regrets today?
Absolutely, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or conflict of interest declared today? I don't see any. We have the minutes that were circulated for our October 27th meeting. They're in our agenda package. Does anybody have any errors or omissions or questions? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as circulated, please? Thank you, Ingrid. Thank you, Navneet. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Sorry, I wanted to make two other quick announcements. I apologize. The note was further on the page, so when I scrolled down, it showed up. Two quick announcements. One, I will be vacating the chair temporarily today, and the vice chair will be taking over. I have a personal matter I have to address, but assuming that the meeting is still ongoing, I will be back, and I will continue to participate in the meeting through Zoom, but only with the audio portion of the signal while I am out of the meeting. And the second announcement is, and this is a kind of a sad announcement, I want to mention that today is our friend Pavan Parmar's last board meeting. Pavan will not be rejoining council this time, which we're all disappointed about, but this will be Pav's last meeting. Thank you for being here today. I imagine you've got a lot going on right now trying to move on to what's next, and we truly appreciate your service to our board, and we're going to put together a formal recognition later, and we'll let you back for that later on. But until the 14th, she's still the councillor for Ward 7, and she's still an active and full member of this board of directors, and we truly appreciate you being here, and we truly appreciate you stepping into the breach when we needed you the most. So thank you for your service. We do not have any presentations on the public agenda. There's nothing on the consent agenda. We go to our discussion items, and we start with 4.1, financial report and forecast for the third quarter 2022. Is there any questions, or does anybody want to frame that in any way whatsoever? Mr. Chief.
Through the chair, I would say we're continuing to travel down the road of a healthy, positive surplus at the end of 2022, which we will use to fund a couple of initiatives in the coming weeks, but most of that money will be utilized in the form of surplus, which we, as the board knows, we will desperately need in the coming years when it comes to funding some of our long-term major projects. And we'll talk about some of those at some point in the budget process of the new facility in one district, some cyber-related technology investments, and so that surplus will serve us quite well. Thank you to Paul and Greg and the financial team for managing that.
Any further comments?
I'd like to move it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the report has been moved. Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Clark. All in favor? That's carried. I will say that this report is testimony to the wonderful job that our financial services folks, and of course the executive do as well, in keeping finances under control, particularly in such a challenging year with fuel costs and everything else. So well done, everybody. Okay, moving on to 4.2, the semi-annual grant agreements execution. This is pretty self-explanatory. Anybody have any questions for the service on this?
I would move it.
Thank you, Clark. Seconded by Navneet. Any last chance for comments or questions? Not seeing any. All in favor? That's carried. 4.3, the 2023 funding request and 10-year capital forecast, aka our budget. Okay, so I would like to go to Kurt on this matter because I think that we have an interest in deferring this from a cycle, a month. And Kurt, did you have a motion with respect to that?
I do have a motion. I know that this is extremely important. I think to all of us and important to the community. I would like to make a motion that we defer it and that the service and the board specifically look at in our future discussions how this increase, particularly the extra % that I think you're seeking, is going to address the board's priorities around crime.
Okay, so that's the motion. No, you seconding it? Okay. Just to frame it a little bit more, one of the things that we wanted to do as a board is to have an opportunity to really be able to own the budgets that we approve, and I guess through circumstances beyond everybody's control, the presentation was only available to us today, so we really didn't have a chance to really get into it, understand it, and own the requisition that we're making to, or propose to make to the region of Halton. So I think that that's the spirit in which this is done. There's nothing concerning at the moment in the budget. It's really a matter of the board really, because it's our budget, we would like to be able to defend it and understand it. So that's really where this is coming from.
Question.
Clark, yes.
How would a deferral fit into the presentation and budget work for when it goes to the region, to council? Because after this meeting, we have the inaugural, and we have to have the striking committee, and have to have unfortunately, another member joining us to replace Councillor Palmer.
Yes.
So how does this actually work in that?
So I spoke to our financial staff, and I'll summarize it, and Paul, maybe you can jump in too, but this template's already been provided to the region. So they already have the basis of this budget. So it would really just be just amendments if we were to make amendments next month. So although we won't meet their deadline, they would certainly have enough information to be able to move forward. Paul, do you have some comment on that?
Yes, just to add one comment. The Regional Council will consider all budgets at the January 10th or 11th meeting of Regional Council, and the binders for Regional Council get put out in late December. So we needed to submit our budget information in the region's format. So we've done that. Should there be any changes, the region staff will have to flow that through their binders.
What is late December?
Our board meeting is December 22nd, I believe. And I think they're ready for binder distribution around the 15th or 16th.
Of December.
So if there are changes, they'll have to open their binders and send them out, or send amendments to the council members.
Yeah, which does happen. So
It does happen. Yeah. It does happen. No, it's just, Mr. Chair, trying to understand that side of the process from where we wear our other hat, and put that on, that we're going to be there to defend the budget and have it pass and everything as well.
And Councillor, it's one of the reasons I feel very strongly about this is, assuming I'm still on the board next time and potentially in the chair, when we go to the council, I'd like to be able to defend the budget, particularly the increase that's been requested above guidelines. So I think it's best that we really truly own it and understand it. Sorry to do that. Chief, you have a comment?
And not to complicate things, but I'm just thinking that I believe the motion is to defer the discussions today until the next board meeting. Right now, that date has been talked about as being December 22nd, which is 3 days from Christmas. I think the inaugural meeting of council is around the 7th. I'm not sure if the board would be able to have the next board meeting any sooner than December 22nd. That may be helpful for a number of different reasons.
Those are my thoughts, Mr. Chair, if I may. I think we should consider moving that meeting forward some.
We could. The only problem, though, is that the council will not have appointed members of the board. So technically speaking, Clark and I, and Pat, of course, would be, we're technically not board members as of midnight on the 14th until we appoint it. So there's a period where there's no board, effectively, or there's a smaller board. until we're reappointed on the 15th of November.
Excuse me, 14th of December is the soonest.
14th of December.
Would be appointed to the board.
So, I mean, we could theoretically call a meeting for the 15th of November, or December.
Once again, I have your budget. The three councilors would not have the budget in advance of the meeting.
Well, potentially, unless they're the same councilors for the most part.
But one will be new, for sure.
That was the reason that the date, 22nd December was actually set at this time 12 months ago.
It's because of the new council.
That's correct.
Council agenda and giving time for the board to have the information, you know, the new board to be constituted, the councilors appointed, and at least have the package, if not in some training for the meeting. Not saying you can't do it, but that's the consequence of moving the meeting up. And you could, of course, do it somewhere in between also. Yeah.
So the chair has the right to call a meeting, so perhaps we can work on looking at the option of having a separate board meeting, particularly for the budget.
Yes.
And doing it earlier if that works out in terms of who gets appointed and the timing of all that. So I'll keep in close tabs with Graham and yourself and see if we can facilitate that. Presuming if the appointments go the way that I suspect they'll go, I don't think there'll be a big learning curve. But we just don't know for sure.
Right.
Does that satisfy you, Kurt, that we'll try to advance the meeting? You're the mover of the motion, so I'm just making sure you're okay with that.
It does, Mr. Chair, yes. The thought that I attach to that is that if there's back and forth, we need as much time as we can possibly have.
Well, even if we have more than a month at this point to review what we've got, and receive any additional information and ask questions between now and then. So we can certainly have time to chew it over, as they say. Great.
So the motion was to defer the meeting to December after the councilors, at some stage after the councilors are appointed.
Maybe we amend it to say we defer the budget to the December board meeting or earlier at the call of the chair.
Okay, right. And there was a explanatory thing there that the budget needs to address the board's concerns about crime. So you mentioned something, Jeff, the presentation or the budget has to also explain is what's in it for the community for the extra 1%. You have to defend that, or the chair in January will have to defend that.
So we would need...
That needs to be clear.
Yeah.
That's what we talked about that 2 weeks ago.
That's true, at the last board meeting. So I guess that would be part... Is that effectively what you were suggesting in your motion?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. I mean, we've got the document here, but it's the first that we see of it, and we do know that there's significant concern about crime in the communities that we serve, and I think we need to get our minds around it and how this budget will help address those concerns.
And how that 1% in particular would further our goals of reducing crime.
I think that in particular, but hopefully the whole budget is going to address
absolutely.
concerns.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, do you have that in hand, that motion?
I believe so. I can read it back and please, if I haven't captured it properly.
Yes, thank you. That'd be great.
So the report, 2023 funding request and 10-year capital forecast be deferred to the December meeting of the board or earlier at the call of the chair, and that the board and service explore ways to demonstrate the requested increase's impact on the level of crime in the community.
Rebecca?
Satisfies me, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
Satisfies me, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
And the seconder satisfied. Is there further discussion or debate on this matter? Not seeing anything on Zoom. All in favor? Doesn't carry. Thank you. Okay, 4.4 is the TELUS Acton Tower Site License Agreement. Again, fairly self-explanatory. Any questions on this at all? No? It's been moved. Pav, did you have a question or a seconding? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. A call again for questions or comments on this?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. I find the ownership of the property seems to be a bit mind-boggling in terms of trying to understand it. And, can this really go on forever? Can the confusion around the site go on forever? And or at what point do we bite the bullet and say we're going to have to find an alternate site? Or do you not think that's ever going to be necessary? I guess is the question.
Certainly through the chair, Bill Payne or Ken are both here.
Through the chair, we have considered that as well, and in this term of this renewal, TELUS is committing to work out those issues with them so that they can offer the service to us. That being said, we have made plans that we could execute fairly rapidly to move equipment, to select a new tower location, without contracts yet or anything like that, but we have looked at that area and where we would move to, and our supplier is ready whenever we need to move quickly should we have to, if things stop working well for us.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I can just follow up. In the event that a move was necessary, is there a likelihood of some disruption of service, and how would that be managed?
Through the chair, if there was a move that was required, we could address it in a number of different ways, depending on the cost that we wanted to incur doing it, from buying all new equipment and installing it before we shut down the old site, or taking a hit on some downtime to move equipment from a day to 0 time. So we could make that determination if that should happen and move in any of those directions rather quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Clerk. Well, let me know if there's anything you need me to do for finding it right up there, because I actually have a couple ideas in mind if this one didn't work, as to would be probably just as suitable as what this site is, and we can discuss that offline.
So in your backyard?
No, but it's not far.
Okay.
No, there's not. There's a couple areas I know where people have proposed towers in the past that have never followed through. That there's even some of the infrastructure in place. So I already know of a couple places like that. It's not far from my backyard.
Okay. Because I just wondered if there would be conflicts of interest.
Oh, no.
Okay, this license agreement has been, approval has been moved and seconded. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Community fund policy. We had a conversation about this last month, I believe, and so this is the update. Fred, you want to walk us through this? Where we stand?
Yeah, so it used to be called the Trust Fund Discretionary Spending Policy. The old policy is appended to this report. This new one would replace it. It focuses on the eligible disbursements previously from 4 areas, which were community relations, board service relations, including outside of Halton, public education awareness and special board requirements, and it focuses them on community relations and outreach, public education and awareness, and rewards. And essentially the intent is to clarify the purpose of the policy, as the board directed that it be called the community fund, because in fact it's not a trust fund, although that was the title. Trust fund by definition is something different. And it's to clarify the eligibility and criteria for applications and awarding money from the community fund. The community fund's proceeds are from found or seized property that's auctioned off. And it is, the fund itself is managed as a separate account by DRPS or HRPS Finance for us. There is certain levels of discretion the board considered as well. They're there for the chair and the chief to make decisions between board meetings should the need arise. They're both set at $5,000 in aggregate for the year. It's a very healthy fund at the moment, and the board has used it for a variety of things, not just for the community's interest in the past. The legislation only requires that it be used in the public interest.
We certainly made some good use of it in the past, that's for sure. Nav, you were up first, then Kurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question regarding, I guess, clause 5.4, and maybe whether the board should be entitled to conduct or review the awards anytime that it needs to be, provided there was in excess of, say, 100,000. I'm not sure what would be seen.
For a specific award?
Like, for example, if you awarded 100,000, if we wanted to see an audit, how that was used, is that part and parcel of 5.4?
Like a conditional grant.
It basically allows for, additionally, it doesn't specifically say that an audit would be carried out, but there's a requirement to return unused funds. So,
But could an audit?
it could, sort of a demonstration of money spent. Just to put it in context, though, our balance is somewhere between 150 and 250, Paul, do you know offhand?
Sorry, I'm reading the policy, trying to catch where the audit privileges might be in there.
Yeah, they're not currently, but
It's not there.
no.
Sorry, your question was what size is the fund?
What's our current?
About 250,000
Yeah.
uncommitted.
Yeah. So the only time that it hit historically, the board kind of maxes out at about 10,000, with the exception of rewards for information, right? And that's the only time they're higher, which are a fixed amount. So just to put it in context, we're talking 5,000 to 10,000 is the typical, or sometimes it's 1,000 or 2,000. So whether an audit would be justified for the numbers is something to consider. But certainly I could put a friendly amendment in there to require a statement of expenditures.
Can I just offer a piece of some help here? Well, first of all, a question. I don't know if this is to Ken or to Graham. I'm not sure it's a legal or governance question. I believe we can put caveats on approval, could we not? If we said that the
Conditions.
Yeah, the Association for Homeless Squirrels that got a $5,000 grant, we could put something in that motion that said that the grant is approved subject to providing us with a copy of an audit of use of funds. Could we do something like that? Would that be something within our rights to do?
I think when you ask for an accounting of the funds after the fact, that might be sufficient. If you say to a community organization, you need to provide us with your audit, that might restrict which groups will.
Yeah.
Because there's a cost associated.
Yeah, maybe I'm not articulate. I'm actually trying to avoid exactly what you're suggesting, because a lot of organizations don't get audited because of the cost of the audit. So I would want to be cautious. That's why putting it in the document concerns me if we hard code it versus providing it on an optional basis, depending on why we have to be making the grant.
Well, because these are publicly facing funds, though, it's not a bad idea to say you may be requested to provide a statement of expenditures related to these funds.
Okay.
And I do think that it does frame it for all parties involved. It's a good idea.
Okay, so would you suggest take it back and do some wording?
I'll just make a friendly amendment, if that's okay, that
What clause would
on to 5.4.
5.4.
And at the end, comma, and a statement of actual expenditures may be requested or required. Does that make sense? Now,
I'm okay with that. I think if the fund is in excess of, say, for example, 50,000, 100,000, that's something that should be looked at. But yes, that's fine. And I'm not sure whether the statement already indicates that, like the accounting of disposition. So in a sense, it does. But I wasn't sure about. It really should be the prerogative of the board to say, okay, for example, you said this is where you're going to spend the money. Did you spend the money there?
okay, an accounting of the distribution of the contribution needs to be made. And provided to the board. That's better. There's a better thing. Yeah.
Sure.
So let's just be very clear. So you raised the issue of audit. An audit's a very specific process versus just a declaration and disposition of proceeds. So an audit is that formal third-party review versus a statement which is essentially somebody's narrative of what happened. What Fred's proposing doesn't use the term audit. I'm trying to make sure I'm capturing your concerns here as well.
Yes, so I'm thinking I'm fine with it if the fund does not go beyond the 10,000, 20,000 mark. But if there's funds that are in excess of, say, 100,000 or something like that, it is something that we should be looking at in terms of ensuring that the monies are spent appropriately, and we would have the right to audit if we have.
So perhaps the additional wording should be along the lines of that a summary of expenditures or an audit may be required at the discretion of the board. How does that work?
Come back for it next month.
Great.
Okay. But I think
I'll send the draft to Navneet to make sure it's captured right. Okay. But I think if we do the either or, and the discretion of the board, then we can make. I don't want to put a dollar value on it.
No.
That's why I want to leave it and invite some really big requests.
Yeah, that's why I'm suggesting at the discretion of the board be part of it. We can actually make that a caveat to an agreement. Kurt's next, then Clark.
I think I'll pass, Mr. Chair. I think the material that I had in my mind is being discussed.
Thank you. Clark?
So I was trying to think through this as it was being discussed, and the wording in 5.4 is proposed there, in my mind, would be sufficient, but it would be adding something that the board may request audited statements for any funded one, or something along those lines, so that if it is a small one, we might look at it and say, yeah, they provided where they spent it, but it could be one if it is a large one, to that means point that we could say, no, we want to have an audited one. Because usually if it's a larger one, they are receiving money from other sources as well, where they're going to get in to have to do the auditing for that as well.
My only worry is that if we were to give, like I was using that silly example before, because I was trying to come up with something.
I feel sorry for the homeless squirrel.
Yeah, but I would think the homeless squirrel organization would be a very small organization, probably wouldn't be given government funds. They might not be subject to an audit. If you gave them $5,000, they're going to spend $5,000 on an audit. So that was my concern, and that's a lot of nuts. But if we provide that option and the board can make that as part of the adjudication of the application, that, we believe that this amount justifies an audit be provided to us.
And I think that's the front end, like, when they're applying.
Yeah, they should know up front.
They would know up front that the board, they may ask for that, and then at least they're aware.
Yeah. Audit costs are expensive, and they're getting more expensive as liability insurance for auditors increases, so. Okay, so this is being deferred to a subsequent meeting for redrafting based on the suggestions provided today. Can I get a motion to receive?
I think that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just a couple of things I don't want to miss and then come back to later to address. One, I don't think we've ever dealt with a large dollar amount except in the possible instance of a $50,000 reward leading to the successful arrest and charging in a homicide situation. Those dollars show up in this account as committed. We don't usually pay out those dollars, but there's potential. I don't believe the board would ever go over $20,000. You could always, if it was ever a request from a community organization over $20,000, it could come back to the board to put steps in place to make sure that the money was accounted for. One concern area that I do have I spoke about it just briefly with Fred. I don't want to see the board handcuff yourselves when there are sometimes what I think are some very legitimate programs or events to invest in, which might not be in the community technically because they might be within the service. And I'll give you the best example I can think of that right now, and I would come to the board today with the same request for this year before the policy changes, and that's the symposium for the Women's Internal Support Network. Last year, the board provided $15,000 to our Women's Internal Support Network to Sue and Anita and her group, and you'll hear some of the results of that today from them and from Sarah and others. And they're just set to host the second one this year, which will be about the same amount, which I would come to the board now today to ask for that. But I believe if you leave it exactly the way it's worded, it could be interpreted that you would not be able to fund that type of an event. And I do believe that the Women's Internal Support Network Symposium and perhaps some others like it in the future are in the community interest that we have that here. That in that case, the women within the service who are working on behalf of the community are benefiting. It's making it, I think it fits in with what this board would want to do. So that's the only thing. Fred and I had some brief discussions about that. I would ask that the board reconsider that in special circumstances that these funds could be used to provide support to something like that. And I'll ask the question about this year separate.
Sure. Fred, is there anything in there now that would in any way bind us to not challenge our ability to be able to approve such a request in the future?
That type of thing is not explicitly contemplated here, nor was it before. And the board's commitment last year was a very liberal interpretation of the existing policy. And would be even more liberal interpretation of this one. It basically comes down to what does the board want to use budget dollars for and seized property funds for. That's the thing. Both of which could be for budgeted or unbudgeted purposes. Usually the budget dollars are for internal activities, and the community fund monies or trust fund monies are for external items, but not exclusively. And it does vary. The way these funds are used across the province does vary, and varies with circumstance and by board.
Okay, so the answer to that is
basically how the board wants to choose it, but it should be articulated in the policy as a public-facing document. I would just say basically the question is, what do you think the budget dollars should be going towards the service budget and the governance budget, and what should the community fund dollars be going towards? Both of which are relatively sizable. $250,000 in the community fund is a lot of money. So is $150 million budget with a $3 million surplus. It's about matching up. You could also consider it a bit like the province uses grant money, which we also had a report on that today too. So there's lots of ways of incenting things. So
can I suggest that because this is coming back next month, can you maybe provide the board with a couple options that would give us the chance to have that conversation to further explore it?
Yep.
Okay. Kurt?
And I maybe should know the answer to this, Chief. Does the budget now not contemplate wellness, service wellness investment?
Yeah, I mean, certainly through the chair, it does. I mean, our budget looks at a lot of different things that we ought to be able to plan ahead for every year. But we have some very real examples of where we do not necessarily do it that way because we know within surpluses and within salary dollars flowing in and out of the organization, we can fund some things. Overtime is one of them. We typically greatly under budget for overtime, knowing that we can absorb the overtime within the budget, but it's hard to budget for something specific, such as $15,000 for a internal support network symposium without it having an impact on the budget. And then on the flip side, these funds typically are around $250,000 every year. It's not a dwindling, reducing resource that the board has. It's money in and money out, and you'll spend some this year on whatever you authorize it for, and then money will come back in through property and other mechanisms. So it is something that's there, which is healthy, and that's why I'm bringing it forward.
I certainly think that, the activity of this group is very worthwhile. And I think it should happen. My experience is that in the past, where I've been, it's been funded within budget and planned for as a necessary activity. Just a comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. So if we, to move this forward though, perhaps, as I suggested, Mr. Sejo, if you could, in addition to the drafting that you need to do on 5.4, if you could maybe provide us with an option that the board could then use as a catalyst to have that conversation at the next meeting when we hopefully finally approve this policy. Does that work? Yeah, thank you. Making a motion to receive and refer for further drafting. Thank you. Kurt, seconded by Clark. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we're moving on to 4.6, amendments to procedural bylaw. Mr. CGO, you want to frame this for us?
I'm sorry. I'll refer to the clerk who drafted the report.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. And yes, this is to incorporate the direction that the board put forward at the last meeting that delegations, deputations, whatever the term be, restricted to people who are members of the Halton community. So the report does go into a more detailed description of who that entails. It's people who work, own property, attend school, or reside or operate a business in Halton region.
Members of the board, Kurt.
Mr. Chair, I think that the Secretary has done an amazing job of drafting this, and I'm prepared to move it. Thank you.
I have a question,
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I think it's exceptionally well done. I'm wondering if, excuse me, if we might want to include under the residential requirement, if we may want to say, just to strengthen it, individuals who permanently reside in Halton. Because there may be people who are just transitioning through Halton. So if it's a permanent resident of Halton, just a suggestion.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. So he's not giving a hotel address.
Yeah, exactly.
Changeable name.
Absolutely. If that's the board's wish, I can incorporate that.
Don has a point.
Individuals who permanently reside.
Sure. Thank you. Don, you have the floor.
Yeah, just that, could they also be renters only as opposed to property owners?
Residents, yeah.
Residents.
It says residents, Don.
What constitutes a residence? Your primary dwelling?
One who resides.
Living in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the addition of the word permanent means that the permanent place of residence doesn't stipulate how they secure their tenure, whether it's by purchase or by rental, or frankly by living with parents
Or tent, yeah.
Or tent.
Thank you.
Squirrels.
Yeah, with the homeless squirrels. Clark? So I guess the concern I would have on that is you could have a business owner who has a business in here, is employing people in Halton, but doesn't live in Halton. Right. They're not a resident.
That's right.
But they are doing business in Halton. So I think we have to be cautious on putting something like that in, because it could open us to criticism as to who is, who it is excluding by unintended circumstance.
But owning a business is a different subject than a permanent resident.
I know, but if they're a permanent if they own the business, would they, but they don't live in Halton, would they be allowed to come and delegate?
Well, they're not a resident.
Can we come to the clerk or the secretary?
I don't think they would, just in my opinion. Well, the lawyer's jumping up too.
I've got Graham wanted to comment, and then I'll come to Ken.
Just referring to the way that the amendment to the bylaw is worded, it does contain what I guess I'll call it the out clause, which says delegations that don't satisfy any of those may still be heard by the board if the subject of the delegation is deemed to be in the board's interest, and the board elects to waive the rules noted above. So you have these four stipulations, but if there was somebody who, to the point of permanent versus temporary resident, still wanted to make a good faith request to delegate to the board can still allow that.
But let me just jump in for a second. A 15.1D actually stipulates owners or operate businesses. That's what I thought you were going to say. So we've already covered it. So the only issue here is the permanency of the tenure of the residency. So if we change that to permanent resident, we're still capturing a business operator that lives in Peel, that works in Acton.
I can't support it, because, why are we after somebody who might be, where Halton is a temporary one? Okay, somebody's living in Melton, they're waiting for their house to be built in Oakville, and they're at an address as they're waiting. Is that a permanent resident? As it states as a resident in there, it catches them. I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but down the road, you never know.
Oh, let's go to the lawyer for a second, because how would you define resident?
Occupancy of a residential unit.
Would that include a hotel room?
Well, at the end of
that was the
day,
example given.
And I think Mr. Chairman, last meeting I addressed the efficacy of this provision. At the end of the day, the board still has the discretion under other provisions in this bylaw to exclude individuals based on their past behavior, their conduct at meetings, things like that. So if you have someone who, at the end of the day, you wish to exclude, it's a whole discretion to do it. So if you believe that at the end of the day, it's the subject matter that the person is speaking to. If you believe that that's not within the board's jurisdiction, or it's not something that the board is going to consider, you can always say to the delegate, no thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to withdraw.
I was going to ask you. Okay.
It's not worth debating any further in the interest of time.
But I think we can achieve what you're attempting to achieve.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you, Clark.
Okay. Anything further on that particular suggestion, Kurt?
I don't want to bore us, Mr. Chair, but I've been on this board for 3.5 years now, and I can count the number of people that have come before the board on one hand. And it strikes me that anything that might be of interest to this board, service or whatnot, without getting into a whole lot of toing and throwing over subject matter where they live, I think we should hear them, and I'm happy with the way it's drafted.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion? Thank you. So
I made a motion.
I'll second it.
Did you already make the motion before?
I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll second
Oh,
it.
that's right. And then then Ingrid wanted to speak to it. So you were sort of seconding it anyway.
Yes, I will.
So it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion on this particular amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 4.7 is the board meeting schedule. Any questions or comments on this? Pretty straightforward, I think. Clark's moving it. Thank you. Seconded by? Thank you, Kurt. Any further comments or questions? All in favor? That's carried. I do want to note that the October meeting is on my birthday, so just mark that in your calendars now. Actually, could you just put that on?
Wow.
Thank you. Put it right in Delatrust.
Just-
October. So we'll come to the board meeting and celebrate my birthday. Operational verbal update.
First of all, I'd like to thank the board for their support of the funeral for Jim Harding, and I know 3 of you were able to be there in person, which is greatly appreciated, and the support of our members, past and current, who took part in that service. So a tremendous shout out to our pipes and drums, our honor guard, our police chorus, of which Jim was a founding member and singer in. And to a wonderful, I'm not sure how old Simone was, but she was an incredibly young, blind woman who sang 2 songs there today. So it was a very memorable moment and an honor for us to be a part of that. I don't think we have other new business for this meeting. I did want to ask about the Women's Internal Support Network, which is coming up very soon. And the board had supported that last year at $15,000. I think that would be enough or more than enough this year. We may return some funds, but I would ask the board for them to consider that. I know it's not coming forward in a board report, but it also did not last year.
Pat?
Sorry, we just discussed the community fund, and I wonder if we can accommodate the chief's request for the funds for this year, which would kind of resolve having to go back and coming up with options, and also having to go back to the budget, which has already been submitted. It may be more efficient for us to accommodate the request as we have done in the past, and going forward, the team can budget for it accordingly in future years. I'd be happy to.
I was going to say, why don't you put that in the form of a motion?
Okay. Grant?
Along the lines of that we would support it this year, but we request that the service provide budgetary accommodation for it in ensuing years. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'm happy to second it, Mr. Chair.
You're just such a happy guy.
I think this is a great cause.
Okay.
I'd just like to see it funded internally and planned for in the budget.
Let's achieve both of those goals. Is there further discussion? Ingrid?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to raise one area while we're doing operational updates.
Sorry, can I dispose of this first, and then we'll get back to that?
Okay.
Okay. Is there any further questions or comments on Pav's and Kurt's motion? Yes, sir. Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. That's approved. No, you're up.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment the service of the announcement that we received a few days ago, where we have engaged Dr. Barbara Perry, a hate crime researcher, to be working with the service and with the community. I think that that's a wonderful step forward. And I took a look at the background and the biography. She certainly is extremely well-renowned in her area of expertise, and I think it will serve us in Halton and the service very, very well. So kudos to the service.
Thank you, and just a brief response to that. I met with Dr. Perry, as did the deputies, the Sergeant Ryan Smiths of the world, those people that we'd like to clone, Julie Craddock, and many other members of the service, and she is very complimentary. Her report's obviously not done, but she's very complimentary and positive about the proactive manner in which the Halton Regional Police Service deal with a variety of issues, including hate crimes, and are reaching out to the community. Things that we do, our diversity forum, we had a chance and opportunity to talk about a lot of those things that many of you as board members have been to some of those meetings that pay dividends when things happen in a variety of our diverse communities. So I'm very pleased with the meeting that I had with her. I expect a report coming forward which is both complimentary and hopefully also gives us some suggestions for improvement, because we're never going to be perfect. We just have to try to get closer.
But what's interesting is the survey that she's conducting, and even the fact that she's offering anyone in the community to write to her directly. I mean, that speaks volumes, because I'm sure she'll be inundated with queries from the public.
She has a very high energy level.
people need it.
An exciting opportunity for the service and the community. Nothing further, thank you. Okay, you've had your outstanding board items list circulated. Any questions on that? Did you want to frame anything, Fred?
Yeah, the last item was covered today, the procedural bylaw.
Yep.
And there's, and the first three items are in here.
Okay. Can I get a motion to receive the report? Thank you, Clark. Seconded by Kurt. Thank you very much. All in favor? That's received. New business. Anybody have any new business to bring before the board today? Oh, correspondence. I'm sorry. Correspondence. My favorite section of every board.
There's three items on there. Two advocacy letters from Durham Regional Police Board and community fund request from Muslim Association of Canada, local chapter.
Yep. Okay, so how would you like to deal with your correspondence then? We have this request for funds. Mr. CGO, going forward, should we maybe have that as a separate agenda item?
Could have been.
Yeah. Maybe that's part of our new governance policy on this, that the requests are listed as a specific agenda item going forward.
Yeah, I think that would have been better.
Okay. But having said that, what's your pleasure on this particular item? Does anybody have any comments or questions, or would somebody like to suggest some sort of action on this? Do we want to investigate it further, or how would you like to adjudicate this request?
Everybody got access to it. Summarize it.
Why don't you give us a summary for the sake of the public as well?
So they run a winter retreat and for youth, and there's about 100 individuals that attend. Part of the Muslim Association of Canada, and 21 of them require financial support. They have different price points, but the average cost is $460, so they're asking that these 21 people be subsidized. In fact, all of their costs covered for a total of $10,000. 21 of 100 attendees.
I'm inclined to support it. The only question I had, Mr. Chair, was it wasn't clear to me where these people resided.
That's a good call.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the same thing.
So, can I make a suggestion then? If we want to approve it, why don't we make the motion that we are prepared to subsidize up to 21 individuals who are resident in Halton Region?
I think that's a brilliant motion, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Wish I could make it.
I think Kurt just did.
Chief?
Yeah, I apologize. I have not seen this correspondence, and I'm not sure if it's in my materials, but we'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
There's going to be a number of different groups that may approach the board for funding, and every group that's called A, B, or C is not necessarily good. I'm just not sure. The board may want to vet this sort of communication through us in a different way to make sure that you're not funding something on the negative side of the law or society, if I can just leave it very general.
I agree with you. I happen to know this organization. I have no concerns about this particular organization, but you're absolutely correct, which I think is one of the benefits of getting this as a separate agenda item going forward. So I think that's a really good idea, that should be part of the process. But I'm familiar with the Muslim Association of Canada. I'm sorry, Don, you have a question, sir?
Yeah, what is wrong, and I've gone down this path for many years of asking them to participate in a minor sense, it's more for a goodwill gesture, to have a little skin in the game. You know, you pick the percentage. I don't care if it's 20%, 10%, but at least it isn't just a handout. It's something that the children themselves can get creative and have work projects and I found those to be very beneficial moving forward. And it just doesn't leave you wide open-ended for anybody that just wants to knock on their door and get a handout.
Yeah?
Worthwhile. Yes, that's old school, but that's the way we used to do it.
Yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have, I do want to stress that I think I would agree with the Chief that we don't really have a process of seeing what type of requests come in. We are looking at requests as they come in. And maybe we should communicate some sort of a process in which we see these type of requests and what kind of criteria that we fulfill and then approve these requests. So I do think there's some in good in doing this kind of processing and back forward. So maybe we need more information sometime.
I would agree, and I think that if we were to make sure that these items get listed on the agenda, and as part of that process, to make sure that they're run by the service as well, I think that would achieve that goal. Yeah, and maybe that's something that, because we're working on this policy, we could actually.
I'm not sure why it ended up in where it is normally in this agenda item.
Yeah. Clark.
I guess it would be to the motion that's on the floor about supporting it for the 21 individuals. Is it the 10,000 that they are requesting for those 21 individuals, or what levels of support do we have? I just want to know what I'm going to vote on, Mr. Chair.
My suggestion was that we support up to 21, which is their request, and their estimated cost is $460 per individual. So
that's plus their Halton residents.
Only if they're Halton residents, that they would have to provide us with evidence of residence.
This chapter, you can see, is Halton and Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to provide a second to the motion, and I'm very familiar with the organization as well, and do a lot of great work for our community, so I'm happy to second it, and I agree, definitely, we should have it on the agenda going forward so that the board can review it.
So the motion's been moved and seconded, and just to be clear, it's up to 21 individuals at the subsidy rate of $460 per individual who is a resident of Halton. Is that permanent resident? I'm just we're not going to go there. Just for fun. That's been moved and seconded. Are there any further comments or questions? All in favor?
The Chief has a comment.
You had a comment?
No, I'm fully supportive of the Muslim Association, and we have great relationships with many of the individuals. Not being a board member, it seems like a large dollar amount for the first one that you're going to do without new policy being in place. And it may open floodgates in different ways, but it's just sort of a cautionary feeling that I have that NAB convinced me to say out.
Well, just for clarity, and I think Pav is of the same, so Pav and I are both familiar with the organization. I wouldn't be as willing to accept that, if I didn't know who the group was. I didn't know the application was coming forward. If it was just some random organization that we were not familiar with, I'd have much more, obviously wouldn't be prepared to make that motion. So I'm not making the motion, but I wouldn't necessarily support it unless I had some firsthand knowledge of their legitimacy and efficacy. So the question was on the floor. I'm going to call it. Don?
Yeah. If there's more coming down the way, do we put a limit as far as to be equal and fair to everyone, that we put a limit as to how many programs an individual can get support on?
So that's going to be a conversation when we discuss the policy next month. That's not going to be a conversation, because that's not what this motion's about. This motion's about a specific application.
Okay. Got it.
But that's certainly a conversation we can have as we finish that policy piece, because that's what we were in the process of doing. So we're learning as we're going. I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Somebody want to give me a motion to receive the balance of the correspondence? Thank you, Clark. Seconded by Ingrid. Thank you. All in favor? That's received. New business. Seeing no new business, I'll take a motion to go into a confidential session. Thank you, Kurt. Seconded by Nav. Thank you very much. All in favor? This board meeting is going to go into closed session, close to the public for the purpose of discussing matters of a confidential HR or other nature that requires confidentiality. To those who may be watching us on streaming today, I want to thank you for your interest in the affairs of the Halton Police Board. Thank you for watching today, and I hope that you'll come back and watch our board meeting again next month. If ever you have any questions or you want to learn more about the Halton Police Board, visit our website at haltonpoliceboard.ca, and feel free to reach out to ask questions or add comments. And I will also mention that tomorrow is Remembrance Day, and I hope that everybody is going to get out to a Remembrance Day ceremony across Halton Region. A number of our board members will be participating at those ceremonies tomorrow along with the service. We're very excited about our involvement this year formally as the board. I'll be personally master ceremonies at the Trafalgar Memorial, but I know other board members will be attending ceremonies in their respective communities. So thank you very much for your time and attention today. This meeting is recessed. Yes, sir.
I'm just passing on a message from Kimberly. She requested that for those partaking tomorrow from the board, we should take pictures and forward them to her.
Okay, Kimberly is very impressed that you channeled that you remembered. Thank you. She's very happy. Thank you for mentioning that. So members of the board, this meeting is recessed until 2:45, and it'll be reconvened under the chairmanship of the vice chair.